Senate will come to order. Those not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we're led in prayer by Deborah Thomas of the Non-Denominational Fellowship Pentecostal Ministries in Charleston, West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senator from Taylor leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor.
Gracious Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity to be able to stand in your midst as well as everyone that's here. God, before I can even say anything, I have to say thank you to the governor of this great state, to our Senate president, to the Senate clerk and his staff, to the head doorkeeper, his assistant, and their staff, every senator and every family member that's represented of the Senate, and to everybody that's here, all of your families, and to my special friend, Wanda Casco and Gray Lawston, to everybody that's in this building under the sound of my weak voice. God, I thank you for allowing me to be able to petition for them, to say thank you for everything that you've done this Senate session. Now, God, we ask that you continue to let us love one another. Let us be able to help one another when in need. And, God, allow us to be able to agree to disagree and still be friends at the end of the day. God, I praise you. I lift you up. I glorify you. I thank you for my husband. I thank you for my job here at the Capitol. I thank you, God. And I thank you for blessing everyone that's here. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Senator from Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask all the members in the gallery to please stand and join us on this President's Day, pledging to the greatest nation on the planet. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, February 17th, 2023. The Senate met at 9:30
Senator
a.m.
from Wood requests unanimous consent to further reading the journal is dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction of guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome the honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest is the senior senator from the 8th, Carly Smith, Kaylin Craig, and Brianna Coleman. Please hold your applause till I'm finished. As guest is the senator from Morgan, Ariel Smith. As guest is the senator from Jefferson, Teresa Rucker. As guest is the senator from Taylor, Reagan Taylor. As guest is the senator from Brooke, Elizabeth Rhodes. As guest is the senator from Harrison, Caitlin Kerr, Audrey Kerr, and Savannah Shepard. Now, will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our doc of the day. In the rear of the chamber with us today, we have Dr. Benjamin Silverberg from Morgantown, West Virginia. If you wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Further introductions. Junior Senator from the 7th, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the President's Gallery today, I'm pleased to have with me a couple of my biggest supporters. My Aunt Donna Campbell, who lives in Seth Boone County, and her granddaughter and my second cousin, Abigail Stallings, who lives in Foster, West Virginia, where she's a student at Brookview Elementary School. Abby's parents are Matt and Crystal Stallings, and Matt's the principal at Sherman High School. Donna and Abby, please stand, and will the members please join me in welcoming them to the Senate.
Senator from Pleasants.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some special women here today, the West Virginia Republican women. We have Putman, Kanawha, Mingo, Central, North Central, Wood, Huntington, Cabell, and Gateway. All these presidents of these clubs are here today. We have the state chairman of the West Virginia Republican Women, Dr. Jean Hawkins. Would you all please stand? The ones I've already called, and okay. And want you to make them welcome. And then I have a special guest. These are the backbone of the Republican women in West Virginia. A special guest showed up this morning, and her name is Victoria Yeager. Victoria, would you stand up? She's in the back gallery. And Victoria is the widow of Chuck Yeager. Thank you all very much.
Senator from Wood.
Mr. President, in your gallery, the President's Gallery, a couple friends of mine from Wood County, Mayor Tommy Joyce, Mayor of Parkersburg, and my longtime buddy since he was a kid. He got cut his teeth on my congressional campaign back in 18-something or whatever, but we had longtime friends, and he is former city councilman in Parkersburg, Warren Biggs, big leagues.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of you have seen some information regarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on your desk, and we have a resolution later on today regarding that. But we have some guests in the North Gallery here that I had the privilege to meet earlier this morning, and many of you probably also saw a replica of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier just below us as you exit the building. With us today, who are a part of the Society of the Honor Guard of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, and I'll have them all stand as I call their name. Lonnie LeGrand, he's the Society founder. We also have Sergeant First Class Brian Googler. He's with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, the 40th Sergeant of the Guard. We also have Staff Sergeant Taylor Euler. He's an active duty member that comes to us from Arlington Cemetery. Former Tomb Guards that are here today, First Sergeant Dennis McMahon, as well as Specialist John Cochran. And then also joining us is Major Bill King. He's retired. He's the project manager. Wayne Bates, who's a retired Air Force Master Sergeant and Marine. Team member Mike Elliott, team member Joyce Johnson, and lastly, the event coordinator and associate member who has set all of this up. And we also have replica displays of the tomb that I know will be distributed to members, and that's Michael Perry. He's from Harrison County. He's a Navy veteran. If they could all stand, and the Senate make them feel welcome.
Senator from Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joining us today up in the North Gallery, chaperoning for one of our pages here, Reagan Taylor, who is my daughter, and is the chaperones. And I'm not sure which one is the actual chaperone for Reagan, is my wife, Christy Taylor, and Reagan's brother, Jack Taylor. So if the Senate will please make them welcome.
Senator from Marion.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Today is the first ever Fairness for All Day in the West Virginia Legislature, where dozens of LGBTQ plus Mountaineers have traveled across the great state to have their voices heard. Would the Senate please make them feel welcome?
Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the President's Gallery, I have a special friend who came to visit today, Miss Pam Hay, who I taught with at Leon Elementary for a number of years, and she is visiting today with her husband, Roy, and if she would please stand and give us a little wave. She loves when you embarrass her. If the Senate would please make her feel welcome.
Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. we do have some Republican dignitaries with us in the South Gallery. Former delegate and president of the Cabell County Commission, Kelly Sabonia. Her grandchildren, Edison and Palmer. And Abby Sabonia, her daughter. And of course, my former classmate, schoolmate, Janina Michael. Will you all please stand and be recognized?
Senator from Upshur.
Mr. President, I have a couple introductions. Today we have visiting with us the First Lady of Randolph County, Amy Carnes, the wife of Senator Robert Carnes. Would she please stand? And we also have with us today, celebrating on behalf of the Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day, Annette Santilli, and I'm sorry I forgot her husband's first name, but Mr. Santilli. If they'd please stand, and the Senate make them welcome.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seated in the President's Gallery is Elizabeth Piskowski. Elizabeth, would you stand, please? She is here today fighting for health freedom. Senate, please join me and make her welcome.
Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us, seated in the President's Gallery, are chaperones of our honorary pages, Kayleen Craig and Amy Coleman. If they would stand and Senate, please make them welcome. Also, Mr. President, we have with us today one of our pages, Carly Smith, if she would stand. Mr. President, that is our junior Miss West Virginia, and in the President's Gallery is her mother, Andrea Combs, if she would stand, and the Senate, please make both them welcome, please.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the President's Gallery, as chaperones for one of our honorary pages, Ariel Smith, today in the President's Gallery are her parents, Kim and Jamie Smith, and I'd ask them to stand and let the Senate make them welcome. North Gallery.
Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some parents of some awesome pages here today from Harrison County. If Chris and Andrea Kerr and Steve Sherrard and Tara Shields could stand, and the Senate please make them feel welcome. Also, Mr. President, I want to recognize the senator from Brooke had already recognized him, but I want to recognize him and his family individually. They're sitting in the gallery behind me. Mike Perry and his family are here today. Mike took this under his wing to bring the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and their team here to West Virginia. I want to recognize Mike and his family. If they could please stand up and please be recognized. Finally, Mr. President, I want to recognize a good mentor of mine and a photographer from North Central West Virginia. He is here playing support staff, but I do want to recognize him individually. Sam Santilli, photographer, has been a good mentor to me. If he can stand in the house, make him feel welcome one more time.
Are there further introductions? Well, on behalf of the chair, there's one more introduction that I'd like to make. And that is my son, Philip Blair, and his wife, Christy, and then my grandson, Caden Blair, who's sitting in the East Gallery. Would the Senate please make him feel welcome? Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the House amended and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 243, requiring substance use disorder inpatient providers to provide transportation to patients.
Message will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate amend the House amendments to Senate Bill 243.
Senior Senator for the 17th moves the Senate amend the House amendments to Senate Bill 243. Does the clerk have an amendment?
Yes, sir. Senator Maroney moved to amend the House amendment on page 1, line 4 by changing the colon to a period and striking out the words provided.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I question unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of the bill was to require residential substance use disorder service facilities to offer patients a means of transportation to the individual's place of birth, state in which they have previously lived, or a state where they have a family support structure. The House amended the bill to add a proviso limiting transportation that is being provided under the West Virginia Medicaid non-emergency medical benefit, that the patient may not be transported to an out-of-state location greater than 30 miles past a West Virginia border. The proposed amendment to the House amendment strikes this language and would make the provider solely responsible for the out-of-state transportation cost. There's also a title amendment. I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, I urge adoption.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment to the House amendments to Senate Bill 243. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 243 as amended.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 243 as amended. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 243 as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adopted. The question now is on passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2006 relating to reorganizing the Department of Health and Human Resources.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the bill be taken up for immediate consideration. Read a first time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the bill first time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2006 relating to reorganizing the Department of Health and Human Resources. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2896 relating to making West Virginia an agreement state with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Economic Development.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3168, ensuring investment in West Virginia tourism is competitive with other states and accessible long-term.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Economic Development and then to the Committee on Finance. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on the Workforce has had under consideration Senate Bill 597, allowing Workforce West Virginia to hire classified service-exempt employees, and reports the same back with a recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Roland A. Roberts, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 620, increasing maximum number of registered voters per precinct and distance between polling places, and Senate Bill 641, clarifying when magistrate vacancies shall be filled, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 631, updating administration funding and requirements for federal elections held in West Virginia, and reports back to committee substitute for same, And Senate Bill 644, updating contested elections procedures, and reports back to committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the two committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Workforce has had under consideration Senate Bill 661, clarifying preferential recall rights for employees sustaining compensable injury, and reports back to committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Roland A. Roberts, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration Senate Concurrent Resolution 18, originating in committee, requesting the Joint Committee on Government and Finance to study increasing the availability of prescription non-opioid medications, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it be adopted. Respectfully submitted, Michael J. Maroney, Chair.
Report will be received. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 679 through Senate Bill 731 be considered and introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on our chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 679 through Senate Bill 731 be considered and introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
There are none.
Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, naming the U.S. Army First Sergeant James Arnold Browning Memorial Bridge.
The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 17, naming the U.S. Navy HT-2 Philip Joseph P.J. Hayner Memorial Bridge.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Senate Resolution 35, recognizing the Society of Honor Guard Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 35, recognizing the Society of the Honor Guard Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduced the individuals who are here today for this resolution previously, and it is my honor as the chair of the Senate Military Committee to present this resolution for the body's consideration today. I think that many of us have been to Arlington National Cemetery, just outside of D.C., and have seen the tomb. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier started as a tomb for a single World War I veteran whose name was not known and had been previously buried in France, but then was selected from one of four to be buried there. And that interment first took place on November 11th, 1921, so just a little over 100 years ago. There was no monument as we know it now to be there, and that wasn't put there until 1932. And many of you probably saw a replica of it as you walked into the building today. It is a massive marble monument that is one of the most hallowed places in our nation at Arlington Cemetery. I'm going to read very quickly, there's a poem on it that I think is worth noting today. This is on a west panel. There are panels on all sides that indicate different things. On the west panel, there's a poem or an inscription. Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. And I think that's what makes it one of the most hallowed places that we have as a nation, is that someone who gave the last full measure that they had for this nation, and we don't know whether or not where they are, and can thank them and honor them with a proper burial. And so that's why this monument exists. It contains the remains of World War I veteran, World War II veteran, Korea War, but not Vietnam, because one was buried there. An individual who was killed in action in Vietnam was buried there, but was subsequently identified through DNA. And so I'm hopeful that the wars that those of my generation and future generations may have to be in will never have to be counted as one of those unknown soldiers, because DNA evidence will allow for them to be identified by their families. And part of what we're here today to discuss through this resolution is the Honor Guard. And if any of you have been there, you have seen the Honor Guard that guards the tomb. and they have continuously since July 2nd, 1937, without a break. Since July 2nd, 1937, the 3rd Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard, has stood by and guarded the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And if any of you have been there and witnessed the changing of the Guard, it is one of the most impacting things that you will ever see. And if you haven't done, I encourage you to do so. To have the identification badge on your uniform that you have participated and been one of the sentinels that watches the Guard, it is the 3rd least awarded award in the United States military, next to, I forget the other 2. And so those individuals, it's one of the most difficult things to become a part of in the military. And obviously its number is a very small number, those who have walked those 21 steps on that rubber mat. And so this resolution today is to honor not just those who are buried there, but to also honor those who have kept watch since 1937 over this monument. I urge adoption. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? If not, question for Senate is adoption of the resolution. Roll call's been demands. The demand sustained. The demand is sustained. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. Clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the resolution adopted. Other resolutions.
Senate Resolution 36, designating February 20th, 2023 as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day.
Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 36, designating February 20th, 2023 as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day at the Legislature.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Upshur? No? All those in favor vote, well, the question is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on 3rd reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 191 relating to liability for payment of court costs as condition of pretrial diversion agreement. 3rd reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 191 would amend a single section of our state code. It's Section 9 of Article 11C in Chapter 62. And that section has currently 4 subsections, A through D. There are amendments to subsections B, C, and D in the bill. Article 11C of our code is the Community Corrections Act. So throughout subsections B, C, and D, there's a change in terminology from pretrial diversion program to deferred adjudication, which is the correct and appropriate term. And that change is made throughout those subsections. There are some technical corrections. There's a change in the reference from a particular chapter of the code to the code as a whole. And then finally, there's language in here that makes it clear that payment of court costs is to be made a condition of any deferred adjudication agreement. And a proviso is added, this is new language, that says the financial inability to pay court costs may not be a basis for denying a person deferred adjudication consideration. So, Mr. President, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions there may be. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
The bill is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions to the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 293, increasing fees charged by sheriff. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 293 raises the maximum fees that sheriffs may charge for performing various tasks from $25 to $30. It also raises from $25 to $75 the fee for serving notices related to tax sales of real property. The bill increases from $2 to $5 the amount of those fees that are deposited in the sheriff's retirement fund. These fees were last increased 18 years ago when they went from $20 to $25. I'm happy to answer questions, Mr. President, but otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results on this question. 31 yeas, 3 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 303, relating to Violent Crime Prevention Act. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 303 adds a single new section to code requiring state law enforcement agencies to submit ballistic data for any firearm alleged to have been used in connection with certain types of violent crimes to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, known as NIBIN. The bill advances a program supported by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and should aid in solving crimes in West Virginia and elsewhere. I'm happy to answer questions, but otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Junior Senator from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of Senate Bill 303. NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, is a remarkable tool for law enforcement. The system processes shell casings from guns used in crimes, and those shell casings are effectively the same thing as DNA, very unique to a particular firearm. If this bill passes, West Virginia will be only the 4th state in the nation to pass such a bill. It'll be a big statement. It'll result in stories across the country as to our support for law enforcement and our commitment to combat violent crime. NIBIN's especially an important tool in a state like West Virginia, where we import many of those involved in our great drug scourge, principally from places like Detroit, Akron, Dayton, and Atlanta. Drug dealers and drug gangs travel to sell their poisons in West Virginia, and they bring those firearms, or alternatively, they purchase firearms here while they're in West Virginia. Shell casings from shootings, guns confiscated as part of an arrest for drugs or domestic violence, unsolved crimes in which we have shell casings or the actual firearms. The NIBIN system will play an integral role in linking crimes across states, within states, and cold cases long since thought impossible. Shell casings in West Virginia that are processed will lead to critical prosecutions, not only here but across the nation. A stray shell that's processed from Huntington could lead to a murder prosecution in Detroit. A shell casing in Detroit could lead to a crime being solved right here in West Virginia. The NIBIN system's been used to remarkable results across the country. A few years ago, a violent crime victim was found unresponsive on a bridge in critical condition with no witnesses or suspects. A detective found a shell casing in the mud nearby and took it and processed it through NIBIN. Later, a gun was found as part of a crime in a high school. Once the shell casing from that gun was processed, it linked that violent crime to the violent crime on the bridge. More recently, the NIBIN system was critical in solving a shooting right here in West Virginia. A shell casing from a firearm used in a crime in St. Albans was processed through NIBIN, and that shell casing linked to a shooting in Morgantown. Absent NIBIN, the shooting in Morgantown likely would have gone unsolved. With the passage of this bill, joined with our passage in the Senate of Senate Bill 302 2 weeks ago, that required felony warrants to be indexed in the National Crime Information System, this body has made a huge statement in defense of law enforcement and in clamping down on violent crime. These two bills will undoubtedly solve crimes, protect families, and very quickly lead to getting violent criminals off our streets. I urge every member of this body to join me in passage of this important bill.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 430 relating to State Treasurer's authority to contract with financial institutions for banking goods and services. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wood.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an agency bill from the Treasurer's Office. It creates a new section in Chapter 12 of our code which covers public monies and securities. The bill creates definitions for the terms banking goods or services, financial institution, spending unit, and state funds. The bill also makes clear that absent an exemption granted by the state treasurer, the Department of Revenue must utilize the state treasurer's contracts or agreements for any banking goods and services required for said procedures. I urge passage and can answer questions.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a ruling of the chair pursuant to Rule 43 of the Rules of the Senate. And I disclose that I am a director. I serve on a board of directors for a community bank, and I ask for a ruling of the chair as to whether or not it would be appropriate for me to vote upon this measure.
You're a member of a class. You'll be required to vote. Father, Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Same request.
Same answer.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 455, modifying certain used car restrictions. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill removes the requirement that used motor vehicle dealers exclusively sell used motor vehicles. The bill also removes used motor vehicle dealer requirements related to minimum display areas for vehicles, minimum office space size, telephone requirements, and minimum opening hours. Lastly, the bill increases the number of used motor vehicles a person must sell in a fiscal year without having to register as a used motor vehicle dealer with the DMV from 5 to 10 used motor vehicles. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Marion. Senator Yields. Senator Yields.
Thank you, Senator. I just looked at this bill. I have a very small used car dealership in my district. The guy maybe sells 4 or 5 cars a year. Is this going to affect his way of doing business?
No, it should not affect him.
He'll still be able to get a license.
He can
even
still
though
get a
he's
license.
under...
It's just a requirement for a license from 5 to 10. If he wants to get a license, is able to, he can still get the license. Yeah, if they're under 10, he doesn't even have to get a license.
And he can still operate a used car dealership.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 559 relating to spousal privilege, third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 599 amends a single section of our state code. It's in Chapter 57, Article 3, Section 3. And that section addresses, actually the whole article addresses competency of witnesses. So the short title speaks in terms of privilege, but it's really a question of competency of witnesses. There are a couple protections, privileges that the law recognizes for spouses in court. This section addresses, for criminal cases, when the spouse of a defendant may be called as a witness. And under current law, the spouse can be compelled to testify, either spouse, on behalf of each other. But the general rule is that a spouse is incompetent to testify against his or her spouse if called by the state, by the prosecutor. Now, in current law, there are some exceptions to that. And so the law allows currently a spouse to be called as a witness by the prosecutor, by the state, against his or her spouse in the case of a prosecution for an offense committed by one against the other, or against the child, father, mother, sister, or brother of either of them. This bill will add to that any child. So it narrows the privilege, or it narrows the circumstances in which a spouse is incompetent as a witness on behalf of the state. And it says that if there's a crime involving any child, the spouse of the defendant may be called as a witness. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 568 relating to dangerousness assessment advisory board, third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 568 amends one single section of our state code. It's Chapter 27, Article 6A, Section 13. And that is a section that created the Dangerousness Assessment Board. And with the Senate's indulgence, I'll just give you a little history. We created this a couple years ago when it appeared to us that the DHHR was getting ready to release a whole bunch of, potentially release a whole bunch of dangerous people. And these are people that had been adjudged to be incompetent to stand trial. They had profound mental illnesses in many cases, or people who had been found to be not guilty of the crimes they were charged with by reason of mental illness. What we used to call in the law insanity, but we don't so much anymore. We created this Dangerousness Assessment Board so that judges around the state would have the benefit of having a real entity with expertise to let them know whether or not it's safe to let people be released from the institutions where they're being held, often are mental hospitals. Sharp Hospital, Bateman, that sort of thing. This bill expands the language, and the language in the bill makes it clear that the Dangerousness Assessment Board may offer its services to a court, when requested, and may provide any information or recommendation to the court that the board in its independent judgment considers appropriate to assist the court with matters including but not limited to treatment, placement, discharge, release, community outings, custody, supervision, barriers or obstacles to treatment, placement, discharge, release, community outings, custody, supervision of forensic patients. So the whole idea behind this continues. This board is going to help judges know what is safe or what's not safe with respect to these people if they're not housed in SHARP or whether they need to be housed there. The bill also makes an important point, new language that says neither the secretary, that'd be the secretary of DHHR, nor the medical director shall have supervisory authority over the board, over the Dangerousness Assessment Board. The bill reflects the idea that we want that board to be independent from the secretary of DHHR. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 34 yea, 0 nay, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage. On question unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 34 yea, 0 nay, 0 absent, not voting. More than two-thirds of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 605, requiring state medical examiner to enter into contracts with procurement organization. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the purpose of this bill is to require the Chief Medical Examiner to authorize a person for a position within the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to recover anatomical gifts. The position's duties include identifying potential donors, evaluating donors' eligibility, obtaining recovery authorization. A procurement organization will approve or assign a person for this position. The position shall be grant-funded and provided at no cost to the state. Mr. President, I might just take 1 minute to go a little bit deeper on this one, because I was a little bit disappointed when this bill came to the committee based on the way we've been doing things in the past. So these organ procurement organizations such as CORE, that everyone knows, has offered to put a person in the medical examiner's office in order to help obtaining these anatomical gifts. But in grant funded, no cost to the state, but the Office of the Medical Examiner has been resistant to having help. But in the meantime, numerous people's last wishes are not being carried out, and numerous West Virginians that need donations of anatomical gifts are being left without them. This bill will help thousands of West Virginians within the first couple of years. I'd strongly encourage the Office of the Medical Examiner to implement this as soon as possible as required by this legislation. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Senator. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 34 yea, 0 nay, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2596 to modify when a non-resident student's transfer may be denied. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill includes provisions relating to allowing, upon request of the parent, the superintendent to grant a resident student's transfer request from one school or program to another within the county, so long as grade level capacity and the program and services exist at the time of the request. It also prohibits the superintendent from transferring a resident student from one school to another within the county for reasons affecting the best interests of the schools without the consent of the student's parents. The bill also requires that the open enrollment policy county boards are required to create and establish an open enrollment process and enrollment application period, and also a process for enrollment in any school within the district at any time during the academic year, so long as all the other requirements are met, including that the student has not previously transferred within the same school year. The bill also adds that a student's level 3 or level 4 violation and a lack of programs or services due to areas identifying the county board of critical need policy as reasons for application denial, and removes failure to fill out or submit the application correctly as a basis for denial. The bill also imposes reporting requirements that ultimately require a report to LOCIA on the number of student transfers approved by the county board the preceding school year, as well as the number of transfer applications denied and the reasons for those denials. I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. President. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
The Committee on Education moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2845 relating to removing expired provisions from the code. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very simple a bill that the purpose is to repeal. The purpose of the bill is being repealed was an uninsured and underinsured pilot program. This program established pilots in the state which will receive a grant under the Community Access Program to coordinate health care provider reimbursements. This legislation expired in June of 2007, and this bill repeals that old language. Thank you, Mr. President. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 3164 to extend the termination date of the West Virginia Advisory Council on Rare Diseases due to a delay in beginning its duties. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Title says it all. Basically, this bill is to extend the termination date of the West Virginia Advisory Council on Rare Diseases, which this body recently passed, due to the fact that it just started later than it should have. The bill changes the termination date from January 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2025. This bill would be effective upon passage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and question unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than two-thirds of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 3272 relating to the operation of private trust companies in West Virginia.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill lie over 1 day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 488, aligning state and federal accreditation rules. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 543, authorizing rulemaking changes to terms, procedures, and reporting duties in higher education. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 548, clarifying what parties can redeem delinquent property and limiting those entitled to bid. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 580, authorizing election for special levy renewal. Second reading of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill lie over 1 day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Senate Bill 591, allowing counties and municipalities to jointly undertake development projects. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 596, modifying payment for housing and maintenance of inmates. Second reading of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill move to third with right to amend.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. The bill will be advanced to third reading with right to amend.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 601, providing that West Virginia Secondary School Activities Commission promulgate legislative rules.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill lie over 1 day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 602, establishing West Virginia State University and Bluefield State University to offer associate degrees. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 629, establishing auto renewal program for wildlife licenses. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members.
The Upper Ohio Valley Trail Network. Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading. House Bill 3215, relating to land use.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 72nd, Nugget Riley, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 3215 amends several sections and various articles in Chapter 8A of the West Virginia Code related to land use planning. This bill will streamline development planning and approval processes by Planning Commission. The bill clarifies that planning commissions need only meet quarterly if there is actual business to conduct, but that they shall meet at least semi-annually. The bill also allows the Planning Commission to properly delegate certain planning review and approval tasks to commission staff, so long as the staff review does not take longer than it would a planning commission to review, such as approval of the planning plat, preliminary or provisional land development plans or subdivision plats, and determine completeness, phasing, changes, and technical review for major subdivisions or land development applications. This bill also allows members of the County Board of Zoning Appeals to serve as member of the County Board of Subdivision and Land Development Appeals. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 90 ayes, 4 nays, and 6 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title. House Bill 3215, relating to land use planning.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3428, relating to the West Virginia Business Ready Sites Program.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 87th, Nugget Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill removes the maximum number of 10 West Virginia business-ready sites that may be approved by the Public Service Commission. The bill also eliminates the limits upon the number of sites available per congressional district and the requirement be a pilot program. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 89 ayes, 5 nays, and 6 members absent. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3228, relating to the West Virginia Business Ready Sites Program.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there other bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 10, Campus Self-Defense Act.
Are there amendments?
Delegates Hornbuckle and Walker move to amend the bill.
Objection to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read. If not, gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Hornbuckle, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, this amendment before you today is very, very simple. What it will allow the universities to do is it will give them the option, if they would like to provide housing for students that might not want firearms in their living quarters. I reserve the right to close.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 55th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the amendment. First of all, schools can already do this if they comply with the security measures set forth in 18B45B subsection B subdivision 4. If a university so chooses to establish that framework, that would not necessarily preclude them from doing so in these areas that are identified in the amendment. Secondly, this is very permissive and broad. So nothing would prohibit a school from doing this to one dorm, but it also would not prevent making a gun-free zone in all dorms. So I would urge rejection of the amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Gentleman from the 25th wish to close. Gentleman from the 25th. Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the bill, well, let me go back, take a step backwards. Currently, schools can already have concealed carry on campus. They can already have concealed carry on campus if they would choose to do so. The next thing about what the gentleman, or the chair of Judiciary just stated, is that we need this. We need this piece of legislation. So I will first and foremost encourage you to listen. This amendment, it doesn't take concealed carry away. It does not alter that at all. Nowhere in the piece of legislation does it strike that you cannot have a concealed firearm on campus. Number two is we're going to allow our universities latitude and grace. Latitude and grace. And so what this seeks to do, because I've looked up a lot of them, Rutgers, Colorado State, Texas A&M, even Liberty. And the common thread is that everyone is different. Everyone writes their policies regarding this very important topic different. And I want to do that for our universities. Since I've been down here, and some of you new delegates will find this out, we have fought hard for universities. We have fought awfully hard to increase what they're getting so we can make them whole. We know that enrollment was down. COVID hurt those numbers. What is wrong with helping our universities that if there are some students, they're going to say, no, we don't want to go to West Virginia, Marshall, Concord, Fairmont, to say, stop right there. We're going to work with our legislature, and we're going to give you reasonable living accommodations too. So we're not going to lose any money from tuition of turning the students away. Matter of fact, we're going to be more marketable. we're going to be able to go out across the country and we're going to be able to appease every single student. If you're somebody who wants to live with firearms in your residence halls, we will allow you to do that. If you're the student that just doesn't feel right, well, we want you to, and we will make reasonable accommodations. And number three, the students. We do not have to live there. Whether you're voting for this piece of legislation, whether you're voting against it, it's about the students. Extend that courtesy to them as you would want that courtesy in your own home. Because some of us choose to bear arms in our home, and it's perfectly fine. Some of us choose not to do so. So for the interest of the students, I would ask that you all accept this amendment. Thank you.
The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. No. The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it. The amendment is rejected. Are there further amendments? If not,
Yes. Delegates Hansen and Walker move to amend the bill on page 39, section 5B, lines 102 and 103 by striking out the words or 6174A.
does the gentleman from the 79th request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it been read?
Yes.
Gentleman from the 79th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the clerk just read, this amendment strikes a single code reference from the bill at 6174A. And that's the code reference that refers back to provisional licenses for concealed carry. This bill refers back to the regular license and the provisional license. And the difference between the two, as most of you probably know, is age. A provisional license can be provided to somebody as young as the age of 18. So my amendment, to summarize my amendment, is it's about whether 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and 20-year-olds should be allowed to carry concealed weapons on campus. Now, I think it's important when this bill passes that we get the policy right. And I would also suggest to you all that the Second Amendment is not absolute. And one piece of evidence for that is that this bill includes a dozen exemptions to the Second Amendment right to carry. It's got 2 pages of exemptions already written into the bill. And those are for a variety of things. It's exemptions at, say, a sporting event at the Coliseum or at the football stadium. It's an exemption for carrying concealed weapons in a lab that has toxic chemicals in it, or daycare facilities. There's a dozen exemptions. So we have a duty to think about where those boundaries are and what makes the most sense for our universities and for the kids that are going to school. And so this amendment is about whether that boundary should be 21 or whether that boundary should be 18. So I would like to read a couple of statistics that I think are relevant to this amendment. And the first is that the second leading cause of death among children and teens in West Virginia is guns. Guns is the second leading cause of death among children and teens. And almost 60% of those deaths in West Virginia are suicides. It's much higher than the national average. Another statistic is that West Virginia has the 4th highest rate of gun suicides and gun suicide attempts, the 4th highest rate of all the states in the country. And we have the 6th highest rate of gun suicide deaths. Suicide is an issue in West Virginia, and one that I think we need to pay attention to in this bill. And I think is relevant to this amendment because it's tough for kids who are going to school for the first time, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. So many kids are on campus. They haven't spent a substantial amount of time away from home before. They're meeting new people from different walks of life. They may or may not agree with them. They're under a lot of stress, trying to study and get good grades. And there's a mental health crisis at our universities. We've heard about the mental health crisis at WVU, the drastic increase in the number of students who are seeking counseling, who have not just generalized mental health issues, but suicidal thoughts. And this is all compounded by the fact that so many young people at our universities, for the first time, are provided opportunities to drink and to take drugs, opportunities that may not have been presented to them when they were living with their family. So for these reasons, I would ask that you seriously consider this amendment. Let's try to get the policy right before this bill passes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 55th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. These are valid licenses that we issue in the state of West Virginia that require training. This body made a public policy decision to issue these provisional licenses to these certain classifications of folks, and I don't see any reason why we should be isolating them here. I heard a comment earlier that this should be all about the students, but I would submit to you that adoption of this amendment forgets about a large portion of those students, which are law-abiding gun owners. So I'd urge rejection.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 100th, Delegate Ridenhour.
Yes, I rise in support of 17 to 21-year-old kids. I served in the Marine Corps, and I served with many of these kids. These kids, I put my life in the hands of these kids on many occasions. Many of the veterans in here did the same. I had tremendous trust and confidence in those kids. If I didn't, frankly, I wouldn't have stayed in the Marine Corps as long as I did. But I think that we're disparaging those young gentlemen and gentlewomen who actually put themselves in harm's way in perceiving that they potentially are not mature enough to handle weapons. I believe that kids that go to college are mature. They may do immature things. That doesn't mean that they're not able to handle a weapon or actually take care of the types of situations they may find themselves in. So I'm in opposition to the amendment and in support of our young 17 to 21-year-olds. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 79th, Delegate Hansen, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In judiciary, we heard testimony from several people, including a retired Marine, who went into some detail about the difference between the training that Marines receive versus the training that people with concealed carry licenses receive. He went into detail about that and about his discomfort with the assumption that somebody with a concealed carry training is going to be able to handle the unique situations that arise if there's a campus shooting. Issues, for example, of the amount of adrenaline that would be rushing through someone's veins as they're pulling their gun and trying to make a decision about whether to shoot. Reservations about whether somebody in that position would actually be able to take care of the bad guy with a gun, as opposed to opening up his fellow students and faculty members to even greater danger. And I don't think that that testimony was refuted in Judiciary Committee. This is one reason why I think it's so important that we think real carefully about the age and remove the provisional licenses from this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? No. Nays appear to have it. The nays do have it. The amendment is rejected. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2283, relating to authorized expenditures of revenues from certain state funds for fire departments.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2498 to require medication-assisted treatment programs to have written policies concerning community relations.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Nestor moves to amend the bill on page 1 by striking subsection D in its entirety and inserting in
The
lieu
gentleman
there-
from the 96th asks unanimous consent that to explain the bill, the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 66th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment basically takes what is a good bill and makes it a little bit better, in my opinion. What it does is essentially the impetus of the bill was to gather community insight and input when a medicated treatment facility was going to locate within a county or municipality. That was the spirit of the bill, but it basically left those policies to be ambiguous in nature, not really any oversight. So what the amendment does is it remains consistent with the overall spirit of the bill in that it's designed to promote transparency and encourage input from communities at the local level with regard to the location or relocation of these types of facilities. It does so by keeping the requirement of a Class 1 legal advertisement before there's a location or relocation, and then goes a step further by placing the onus on these treatment facilities to notify the county commission, the county they seek to relocate or locate in, as well as the mayors of any municipality they're in. That will in turn keep with the spirit of the bill in that within 30 days after receiving that notification, the county commission should and the municipality should convene and discuss and gather community insight with respect to the location of these types of facilities. And so I urge adoption. I think it provides teeth to the bill. It provides a no-nonsense, commonsensical approach to how our constituents and the people in the communities can interact with their government at the local level. And I would further add, before I close, at least at this part, is that there clearly is already in current law, it's not affected by the bill in its current state nor the amendment, but there is obviously some of our predecessors felt that these types of facilities needed some form of oversight and restriction because contained in current law is the proviso that you're not able to have one of these facilities within 1/2 of a mile of a K through 12 public or private school, nor can you have one within 1/2 a mile of a daycare. So this is not a new concept. This is just a streamlined and efficient way, if the amendment is adopted, to make sure that our local communities do have input in where and when these things might go in. So I do urge adoption, and I appreciate any support that you provide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentlelady from the 73rd, Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I respect the gentleman from the 66 intention for the amendment, I feel that it is not streamlined and efficient as he says. In his amendment, it says that the notices shall be communicated to the desired locations county commissioners and to the mayor of every municipality within the county by certified mail. So I was thinking, what about Kanawha County? So if you wanted to have move a facility in Kanawha County, you would then have to, as maybe a local doctor's office that provides medication-assisted treatment, you would have to then send by certified mail to around 70 cities in Kanawha County to get their input. It also says that you would have to have approval from the county commission and the municipality where it is located. And I just think that's unnecessary burden when the amendment by the delegate from Harrison, she lists these things out in her amendment. She said MAT programs shall have written policies to measure and minimize the negative impact of existing or new programs may have on a community, promote peaceful coexistence and a plan for change and growth, requires the Class 1 legal advertisement, says that community needs and impacts when selecting a site have to be documented. Community input on the potential impact of the program on the neighborhood needs discussed. Maintenance of a clear and orderly facility that does not impede pedestrian or traffic flow, and identification and maintenance of communication with the community leader for the purpose of fostering good community relations. So while I respect his amendment, I urge rejection.
Gentlelady from the 71st, Delegate Kimball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I speak to the amendment?
Gentlelady is recognized.
So local control, local input, and local awareness. I believe that the gentleman's amendment accomplishes exactly this. There is legal notice to the community and input from the people of that community through participation at hearings and meetings by the County Commission, and also through elected representatives participating in that decision. Through the county commissioners and through the mayors of municipalities, these participants actually decide, not through mere statistics, but by living in the communities if there is, and where that need would be best served. Again, I support the gentleman's amendment, and thank you.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Gentleman from the 54th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just find it a bit ironic that we talk about local control. In fact, we only talk about local control when we want to control something we don't like. If it's something we want to push through, then we want to take away the power of the municipalities. We want to take away the power of the county commissions. Unless it's something we want to keep out of our backyard, then we want to push it off on them to do the dirty work for us. I just find it a bit amusing and ironic. Fact of the matter is, I don't particularly like this type of treatment either, but some people, in reality, it's what some people need to get them to a certain place. It's what some people just aren't quite there yet. Sure, the gold standard should be complete abstinence from all drugs, but in reality that's just not the case. If we make it harder for these type of facilities to open and we shut down these type of facilities, you will see a huge rise in overdose deaths. So I guess that's how you should vote based on this today. We want to be part of the solution. We want to extend the problem. We're in no way close to being through this drug epidemic that has ravaged our state. What this amendment will do will make it harder for people to get help. Whether you approve of that type of help or not, it is a type of help and it does keep people alive. You know what? People will not be able to get help if they're dead. So I strongly urge rejection of the amendment.
The gentleman from the 94th, Delegate Kump.
Speak on the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
I generally oppose any increase in government regulation, but in this case, I would suggest your support. Thank you.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Not. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 66th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether you like these things or you don't like these things, the bill really doesn't touch on that subject. What it touches on is generating community input with respect to the location or relocation of these facilities. The gentlelady who spoke against the amendment, yes, she'd be correct, probably, that Kanawha County has 34 of these. Some counties here in West Virginia don't have any, and certainly Kanawha County has the most. I would just say that if you want to have some input on what goes on, if you want our constituents to have a say in whether or not these facilities are put in their backyard or beside a burgeoning hotel or whatever, if you think that that's proper, then you would want to adopt this amendment. I don't think it really matters how you feel about it, whether we should have more or less, but it is something that clearly our predecessors had addressed before. These aren't something that people here before us thought should just be willy-nilly put around everywhere, and I think it would be an abrogation of our duties not to make it a streamlined and efficient for local people in a community that may have someone proposing such a facility. It would be abrogation of our duties not to let them have a say and provide in code how they would have that say. So I urge adoption. Thank you.
The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2538, requiring usage of child welfare information technology systems.
Are there amendments? Not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill.
House Bill 2607, clarify that vehicles with a capacity larger than 10 passengers may be used to transport students, provided that no more than 10 passengers may be transported at one time.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2900, relating to the Deputy Sheriff Retirement System.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 96th, Delegate Householder.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that we postpone action one day.
Gentleman from 96 asks unanimous consent that the bill, that action on the bill be postponed one day. Is there objection? The chair hears none. The bill, action on the bill will be postponed one day. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2917, relating to allowing retired state employees who meet the minimum qualifications necessary to render post-retirement employment with the Department of Health and Human Resources.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 2937, to reduce the business license fee for West Virginia volunteer fire departments to $250.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 2955, relating to the establishment and operation of regional water, wastewater, and stormwater authorities.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3005, relating to accelerating the conversion of the state excise tax on the privilege of transferring real property into a county excise tax.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3046, fast track for agriculture education endorsement.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3092, relating to in-state food service permit reciprocity.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Revised committee substitute for House Bill 3110, relating to funding the Office of Oil and Gas in the Department of Environmental Protection.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Hansen moves to amend the bill. On page 8, Section 2, lines 55 and 56, by striking out the words "of the first 400 wells" and inserting in lieu thereof the words "for each well." And on page 8, Section 2, lines 60 and 61, by striking out the words "of the first 400 wells" and inserting in lieu thereof the words "for each well." And on page 9, Section 2, lines 66 and 67, by striking out the words "of the first 4,000 wells" and inserting in lieu thereof the words "for each well."
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 79th, Delegate Hansen, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that is addressing the shortage of inspectors that the DEP Office of Oil and Gas has had for several years now. There's about 75,000 oil and gas wells across the state of West Virginia, and due to a decrease in staffing over the last several years, West Virginia has 10 inspectors. So on average, each inspector is responsible for about 7,500 oil and gas wells. Clearly not a good situation, because a lot of these wells need to be inspected periodically. They may be discharging methane into the air. They may be have leaking oil and gas waste tanks that could threaten drinking water supplies, things like that. So this is a bill that goes a long way, as written, toward addressing that shortfall. Back about 5-6 years ago, the DEP had, I believe, 26 inspectors. They were down to 18 inspectors in 2019. Now they're down to 10. And many people in the House and the Senate have been working on this issue for several years. I'm glad that there's finally a bill that's moving. But this bill only gets us from where we are today, 10 inspectors, up to where we were a few years ago, up to that 18. Nowhere near the level of inspectors that we had back in 2016. And there's one particular part of this bill that this amendment addresses, which is there's a loophole, there's a carve-out for 4 specific companies that don't have to pay their fair share. It raises funds in a couple different ways, but one way is by imposing an annual fee on every oil and gas well. And what my amendment would do is ensure that that annual fee is paid by every oil and gas operator, whether they're a big corporation or a small mom and pop company. Due to the carve-out in the bill, the way it's written, where companies only pay for the first 400 wells for the larger producing wells, and they only pay for the first 4,000 wells for the smaller producing wells, there's about $400,000 a year in fees that are not going to come to the state of West Virginia. And that's equivalent to about 5 inspectors. So with this amendment, we can get closer to where we were in the past, staff up our inspectors, make sure that those 750,000 or 75,000 wells across the state are being properly inspected. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 12th, Delegate Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge rejection of the amendment. This bill was negotiated between the DEP and many of the oil and gas producers. The amendment alters the agreement in a negative way. The amendment drastically increases the amount of fees paid by the operators by removing the caps. This could jeopardize the entire bill, which increases funding to DEP for safety inspection. We need to increase the funding and the number of inspectors. The amendment could hurt this effort. To clarify, the number of inspectors, according to DEP, with the bill as is, would go up to 20 inspectors plus supervision. I urge rejection.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the chair recognizes the gentleman from the 79th, Delegate Hansen, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just add that these companies that are not having to pay the fee like every other company has to pay a fee, they can afford to pay these fees. The fee per year for the highest producing wells, these are the Marcellus Shale wells that produce quite a lot of gas, it's a $350 fee. These wells are producing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gas, often millions of dollars of gas per year. They could afford to pay $350 just like the smaller mom and pop oil and gas well operators can pay. And for the low producing wells, the fee is only $25 a well. And for large companies whose business model it is to buy up these low producing wells, they're producing at least about $10,000 a year per well. They can surely afford to pay $25, just like everybody else. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? No. The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it. The amendment is rejected. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3148, relating to financing municipal policemen's and firemen's pension and relief funds.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 3166, to permit a hospital to hold a patient experiencing a psychiatric emergency for up to 72 hours.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3233, relating generally to uniform and equipment allowances for the National Guard.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3278, relating to the practice of optometry.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 3353, relating to the limitations on the financial relationships with foreign entities that have values antithetical to those of the state of West Virginia.
Gentleman from the 96th, Delegate Householder.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that we postpone action one day.
The gentleman from the 96th asks unanimous consent that action on House Bill 3353 be postponed one day. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Action on House Bill 3353 will be postponed one day. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 3376, relating to changing the term teacher in residence to clinical teacher of record.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 3441, revising the training requirements for members of the Higher Education Policy Commission, Council for Community and Technical College Education, and the institutional governing boards.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill be advanced to third reading.
House Bill 3547, increasing the number of personal leave days that County Board of Education employees may use.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Foggin moves to amend the bill on page 1, section 18A, 414, line 17, after the word notice, by striking the remainder of the sentence.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 14th, Delegate Foggin, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only thing this would do would relieve the teacher from finding their own substitute. That would be it.
Is there a debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, if you remember 2021, we had a study resolution where the folks from the Education Department from both the House and Senate traveled around the state getting feedback from teachers, service personnel, and principals and superintendents on some things we can do to improve the overall quality of our teachers' jobs. And one of them was this actual bill, where if a teacher chose to go to, say, a continuing education training, and they wanted to go somewhere out of state, and the training was on a 5-day process where they would be missing school. For them to get off was very difficult. They'd have to take a couple sick days, and then they'd have to use a personal day, and then they'd have to use some sick days to make the 5-day process. So we're not making any changes to the amount of days that the teachers have, but what we're doing is we're getting the teachers the opportunity to take those 5 days in a consecutive run, and taking out the provision of the teacher going out and getting their own substitute. And what the reason is, most of the time they know multiple months prior to that they're going to go away for this training. So if the teacher's done everything they could, they've set up their training, they've got their substitute in line, they've put it in the system, the principal can't tell them they can't take those days because we're short on teachers. So taking this provision out actually harms the effect of the bill, and I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 94th, Delegate Kump.
Permission to speak on the amendment?
Gentleman is recognized.
I like this bill, but I like the amendment even better. I think it improves the bill. I just don't think it's right to require a teacher to provide his own substitute, his or her own substitute. Therefore, I support the amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 60th, Delegate Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I speak to the bill or the amendment?
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I worked closely over the last 2 years, I say, with the gentleman from the Eastern Panhandle there putting this together. And this was one part of this we felt was definitely a pro-teacher bill. As he mentioned, they'd be able to stack those 5 personal days together, and whether it be to a training or if their husband was going to some type of thing and training or convention or wherever, they could go with them in February or October. So this was a great perk for West Virginia teachers over neighboring states, which we could do. Challenge came down that we didn't want to, that bill has several parameters. There can't be more than 15% of the staff out during that time period. That they have to give the 14-day notice. But the other was that they line up their own substitute. We know that there's a shortage of substitutes in the state right now across the country. And what this does is say, if you're going to take that, and most teachers, and I've done this for 30 years, you pretty well know who your people are you want to fill in for your class. You call them ahead of time, have that arranged, and then punch their number in when you punch the absence in. It's very seldom, unless it's an emergency situation, that you just call in without having a sub lined up and let the system do it. So I don't see any harm with the bill as it is. And in fact, I think it keeps a teacher from taking off and just sticking any sub in there. They'll have somebody that knows the room, knows the teacher, knows the class. So I like the bill as it is. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 76, Delegate Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor of the amendment yield for a question?
Will the sponsor yield? Sponsor yields.
Thank you, sir. Can you just explain to us, if your amendment passes, practically how will that work? How is it different than the bill is right now?
What this amendment would do, it would still require the 14 days notice. It would just relieve the teacher requesting of finding their own substitute teacher. You'd put it into the system to find a substitute for you.
Who will be the person that tries to find the substitute in that situation?
The computer.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 14th, Delegate Foggin, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take these educational trips that some people mentioned, and I've been at this for quite a few years myself, 23. And I happen to have a wonderful boss who I rarely have conflict with. Some people aren't as outspoken as me or as forceful as me. My trips typically, the education is in Newfoundland, Wyoming, Maine, Colorado, to do things I want to do, hunting animals typically. So that's not really a school-approved project, and I'm not going to any, teacher meetings. But this is to help the people who aren't as spoken, don't speak up for themselves as much as me. This is to help them be able to take a week off in a row and not have to lie about being sick. Thank you. That's it.
The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor of the roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor of the amendment will press aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. There being 62 yeas, 31 nays, the amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be engrossed in advance of third reading. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 3548, relating to teacher duty-free lunch and daily planning periods.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Clark moves to amend the bill. On page 1, section 18A414, line 5.
The gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark, asks unanimous consent to explain his amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, this is a relatively simple technical change, changing shall and may, the two words, and I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there a debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 20th, Delegate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Does the sponsor yield? Sponsor yields.
I just have an honest question. What's the difference in shall not and may not?
I am not an attorney, so I cannot tell you. I can tell you when the bill was sent down originally, we had the word may in, and during drafting they changed may, scratched out may and added shall. But from what I'm understanding is that if shall is in there, then there's less requirements that potentially a teacher could lose their duty-free lunch.
And that's my question is, this, but in both of these sections that you're striking, it's in the negative, so it says that they may not.
Correct.
So we're changing it to shall. When it says may not, what's the difference in shall not and may not?
Again, like I said, I'm not an attorney, so in regards to the attorney definition, I am not 100% sure. I know when we sent the bill down originally, it had may not. The meat of the bill is at the end of the bill where it says that the teacher cannot be coerced into giving up this time, and they have to have a written agreement for the time that they are giving up. So that is the meat of the bill, but in regards to the shall and the may and the switching of those, I really can't give you a solid answer of why, because, again, I'm not an attorney and how it works.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a debate on the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 54th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also, not being an attorney, but can tell you that shall and may, changing shall to may or may to shall in the negative doesn't change anything, so the amendment really doesn't change the bill at all.
Is there further debate on the amendment? Gentleman from the 99th wish to close? If not, the question is, shall the amendment be adopted? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be engrossed in advance of third reading. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 3549 relating to classroom teachers and special education classroom teachers, individualized education program requirements.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
House Bill 2827, make public charter schools eligible for Safe Schools funds.
Bill will be advanced to second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3337, prohibiting additional drug and alcohol treatment facilities and services in a certain county.
Bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3340, to revise the West Virginia Tax Increment Financing Act.
Bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3387, extending the moratorium on the authorization of new convention and visitor bureaus for an additional 2 years.
Bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3391, establishing filing deadlines for appeals of property tax valuations and issues involving property tax classification and taxability to the West Virginia Office of Tax Appeals.
The bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3408, to clean up statutory provisions regarding the Hope Scholarship Program to better reflect the intent and operation of the program.
The bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3427, relating to consumers' sales and service tax and use tax exemption for certain goods to be incorporated into a qualified new or expanded warehouse or distribution facility.
The bill will be advanced to second reading.
House Bill 3431, eliminating the requirement that the apprenticeship training tax credit base be limited to wages paid to apprentices in the construction trades.
The bill will be advanced to second reading. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 96th, Delegate Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues Bridges, Kirby, Jeffries, Linville, Westfall, and Young.
Are there objections to granting leaves of absence? If not, the leaves will be granted. Introductions of guests. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 54th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see today in the South Gallery we are joined by our former colleague, Delegate Amanda E. Step Burton. The House, please make her feel welcome.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 14th, Delegate Foggin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce my family, my favorite son, Bobby Foggin, my favorite daughter, Jaqueline Foggin, and my favorite wife, Nikki Foggin.
Further introductions? Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 96th, Delegate Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House recess until 4:30 p.m. today.
Are there announcements?
Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 97th, Delegate Hardy.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet today, February 20th at 1:30 p.m. in the Finance Committee room. The agenda is posted. Republican members will caucus at 1:20. Also, Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow, February 21st at 4 p.m. or 30 minutes after adjournment of the House Economic Development in the Finance room. The agenda will be posted. I yield my time back to the Majority Leader.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 96th, Delegate
Thank you,
Household.
Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 behind the chamber.
Gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Judiciary Committee will meet today at 3 p.m. in the committee meeting room. The agenda is posted. The Republicans will caucus in the chairman's office at 2:45.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 1st, Delegate McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet today in the committee room at 1 o'clock. Republican members caucus in the chair's office at 12:45.
Gentleman from the 43rd, Delegate Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 2:30 in the House Education Committee room. The agenda is posted. Furthermore, Republicans will caucus at 2 o'clock in the chairman's office.
The gentlelady from the 49th, Delegate Tully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on House Health and Human Resources will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the East Wing Committee room. The Republican members will caucus at 2:45. The agenda will be posted, and please bring your laptops. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 66th, Delegate Nestor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources will meet Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 9:15 a.m. in the East Wing Committee room. That's room 215E. The agenda will be posted. Please remember to bring your laptops, and Republicans will caucus at 9 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 21st, Delegate Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the House Education Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Economic Development and Tourism will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the House Finance Committee room. Republican members will caucus at 1:45. Also on Wednesday in the East Wing Committee room, your new energy caucus, if you ever wanted to learn about the PGM grid, we will have representatives speaking about the PGM grid, and lunch will be provided for that meeting. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Upon adjournment, all Democrats will caucus in the Cleveland Grove. I repeat, all Democrats will caucus in the Cleveland Grove. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 53rd, Delegate Pritt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement will meet tomorrow, February 21st, 2023 at 10 o'clock a.m. The agenda has been posted. Please bring your laptops.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We stand adjourned. We stand in recess.